for them because most of them, they live around the town.
The UCASA Student Financial Aid Program has completed its 2-year pilot phase. This phase focused on funding tertiary students studying towards careers in various professions of high demand. The program addresses issues such as high dropout rates and a lack of critical skills. Now, joining us in studio is ISFAP chairperson Sizwe Nxasana to tell us more about the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Why did ISFAP feel a need to implement a program like this?
Well, for starters, South Africa has a co-funding model. In other words, government can't deal with all the issues related to funding, especially at tertiary institutions. The second issue is that there's a need to increase the production of especially the priority skills in the country. So ISFAP focuses particularly on those. And thirdly, it is important not just to provide funding or financial aid to students, but also to make sure that they progress, they succeed, and at the end of the day graduate and find employment. So this is what ISFAP is focused on.
Okay, you've just mentioned that one of the aims is to increase priority skills. Can you take us through that? Maybe what type of degree students have to work to, or diploma students have to work to increase priority skills? Right.
So ISFAP is currently focusing particularly on programs like medicine, in other words, medical doctors that are in training, actuaries, chartered accountants, engineers, and there are other degrees in health sciences such as pharmacists, physiotherapists and so on. But we're not yet at all universities. This year, ISFAP is at 11 universities, and we're going to be increasing that obviously as the amount of funding increases to more universities next year.
All right. Now, you've mentioned that you are already at 11 universities. What is the criteria that you focus mainly on previously disadvantaged students? Can you tell us more about that?
Right. So ISFAP focuses on students that come from families or households that earn between 0 and 600,000 annual gross income. And secondly, it obviously has to be students that are pursuing degrees in those priority skills, some of which I've just mentioned. And thirdly, it is important that they are accepted at those universities that ISFAP is in. So at the moment, ISFAP is at the University of Venda, Walter Sisulu University, University of Pretoria, Tshwane University of Technology, University of Wits. Free State is going to come on stream probably next year, Nelson Mandela University, University of Cape Town, and as well as UKZN, University of KwaZulu-Natal. So we're going to be adding more universities, as I mentioned earlier, as we get more funding.
So you've mentioned that you are going to add more universities. Can you give us a time frame on that? Or is it totally dependent on funding?
It is dependent on funding. I did forget to mention one other university, the Central University of Technology, CUT, which is in the Free State. So next year, we also have University of Stellenbosch, which I forgot to mention. So next year, we hope to add, as I mentioned, Free State, and there are going to be a few other universities that are going to be added. We're still in discussion with some of them. So Nelson Mandela University, as an example, is going to be coming on board.
All right. So now let's say I'm at CUT and I'd like to apply. You've given me the bursary, let's call it a bursary as such. What happens then? Do you pay for my accommodation? What else do you pay for?
Yeah, so ISFAP pays for the full cost of study. By that we mean we pay for registration, for tuition, for accommodation, for meals, for books or devices like laptops and things like that. But in addition to that, all the students that are funded by ISFAP get what we call the wraparound support. What does that mean? It means that we understand that these students come into the university system sometimes very often underprepared, and therefore we provide additional academic support. We provide psychosocial support, life skill support, because all of those areas have been proven to improve the success of students in the system. So it's not just enough that student has passed matric, as an example, but it is important that when they are in the system, they're given the support which enables them to pass. We fund students on a full grant basis, and therefore there are no loans. So the funding that's made available is totally grant based. But it is important that the student passes within the regulated time. In other words, if the degree is 3 years, we only fund you for that period.
Okay, so I've heard you mention that it's a holistic approach where you don't only look at the academic achievements of the student, but also, in fact, you look at the personal and you try and assist the student in that way. I've also heard that you say it's totally grant-based. Does this mean that they have to pay back in some way by working for ISFAP, for example?
No, they don't have to work for ISFAP at all. What we do try and make sure is that those students are linked to the world of work. In other words, there are employers that are already looking for these degrees, or students who have graduated in some of those programs, and the fact that we focus on priority skills almost automatically ensures that those students are going to find employment.
I think it's a fantastic initiative. Now, one more question, and this is definitely not related to the program we have just been speaking about. Former President Jacob Zuma announced free education. After he announced that, you resigned from NAFSAS. Can you tell us why?
Well, I covered that, when I made the announcement in August, because, there were just a number of issues. And the important thing is that, I'm now focusing on ISFAP. I'm focusing on making sure that this collaboration between government and the private sector actually works. ISFAP is mainly funded by the private sector.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll definitely keep in touch. That was ISFAP Chairperson Sizwe Nxasana speaking to us about various programs held for previously disadvantaged students. Chief Justice